Well, welcome back, story lovers, to a one-story teller, the channel where every tale is a journey, every character is unforgettable, and every twist will leave you breathless. Whether it's heart-pounding drama, jaw-dropping revelations, or stories that make you question everything you thought you knew, we've got it all right here. So, grab your popcorn, settle in, and let's dive into today's story. Cop stops Black woman FBI agent, shocking when she revealed her power. You won't want to miss this one. It was a quiet evening in the small town of Willow Creek, the kind of evening where the streets were nearly empty and the only sound was the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. Officer Dan Harris was on his usual patrol, cruising down Maple Street, when he noticed a sleek black sedan with tinted windows rolling through a stop sign. "Gotcha," Dan muttered under his breath, flipping on his patrol lights. The car pulled over without hesitation and Dan stepped out, adjusting his hat and walking up to the driver's side with his flashlight in hand. "Evening, ma'am," he said, his tone polite but firm. "You rolled through that stop sign back there. License and registration, please." The woman behind the wheel turned to face him, her expression calm but piercing. She was in her late 30s, with sharp features and an air of authority that Dan couldn't quite place. Her skin was a rich mahogany, and her eyes seemed to see right through him. She handed over her license without a word. Dan took it, glancing at the name, Special Agent Vanessa Cole, Federal Bureau of Investigation. His stomach dropped. An FBI agent? Here? In Willow Creek? He quickly masked his surprise, but his mind was racing. What was an FBI agent doing in his quiet little town? "Special Agent Cole," Dan said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I didn't realize you were FBI. What brings you to Willow Creek?" Vanessa studied him for a moment, her gaze unwavering. "Officer Harris, I'm here on official business. I suggest you let me go about my way." Dan hesitated. He knew he should let her go. She was FBI after all. But something about her demeanor rubbed him the wrong way. She was hiding something, and he was determined to find out what. "I'm sorry, Agent Cole, but I'm going to need to see some identification to confirm your status," he said, his tone firm. Vanessa's lips curled into a faint smile, as if she'd been expecting this. She reached into her glove compartment and pulled out her FBI badge, handing it to Dan. He examined it carefully, but everything seemed to be in order. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story. "Thank you," he said, handing the badge back. "But I'm going to need to know what kind of official business brings you to Willow Creek. This is my town, and I need to know if there's something I should be aware of." Vanessa's smile faded and her expression turned serious. "Officer Harris, I'm going to give you one last chance to walk away. This doesn't concern you." Dan's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to being talked to like this, especially not in his own town. "I'm afraid I can't do that, ma'am. If there's something going on here, I need to know about it." Vanessa sighed as if she'd been hoping it wouldn't come to this. She reached into her jacket and pulled out a small, sleek device that looked like a cross between a smartphone and a high-tech gadget. She pressed a button, and the screen lit up with a series of glowing symbols. "Officer Harris," she said, her voice low and commanding, "you need to step away from the vehicle, now." Dan's eyes widened as he realized what was happening. This wasn't just any FBI agent. This was someone with power, someone who operated on a level far above his pay grade. But before he could react, the device in Vanessa's hand emitted a low hum, and a wave of energy washed over him, freezing him in place. Dane's mind raced as he struggled to move, but his body refused to obey. It was as if he'd been turned to stone. He could only watch as Vanessa stepped out of the car, her movements calm and deliberate. "I warned you," she said, her voice cold. "But you didn't listen. Now you're going to see what happens when you cross someone like me." She raised the device, and the symbols on the screen began to shift and change, glowing brighter with each passing second. Dan's heart pounded in his chest as he realized the full extent of her power. This wasn't just a gadget. It was a weapon, one that could control people, manipulate reality, and who knew what else. Vanessa's eyes locked onto his, and for a moment, he saw something in them. A flicker of regret, perhaps, or maybe just pity. But then it was gone, replaced by a steely resolve. "You're not a bad cop, Officer Harris," she said. "But you're in over your head. This is bigger than you, bigger than Willow Creek. And if you know what's good for you, you'll forget this ever happened." With that, she pressed another button on the device, and the energy holding Dan in place dissipated. He stumbled backward, gasping for breath, as Vanessa got back into her car and drove off into the night. Dan stood there for a long time, staring after the taillights of Vanessa's car as they disappeared into the distance. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. Fear, confusion, anger. Who was Vanessa Cole, really? And what was she doing in Willow Creek? He knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over. Whatever Vanessa was involved in, it was big. Big enough to bring an FBI agent with a high-tech weapon to his quiet little town. And if she thought he was just going to let it go, she had another thing coming. Dan got back into his patrol car, his hands trembling slightly as he gripped the steering wheel. He didn't know where to start, but he knew he had to do something. He couldn't just sit back and let this happen, not when it could put the people of Willow Creek in danger. As he drove back to the station, his mind raced with possibilities. He needed to dig deeper to find out what Vanessa was really after, and he needed to do it fast before it was too late. The next morning, Dan was at the station early, poring over every piece of information he could find on Vanessa Cole. But there wasn't much. Just a few mentions of her name in connection with high-profile cases, and a vague reference to her being part of a special task force within the FBI. It wasn't much to go on, but it was a start. Dan knew he needed to tread carefully. If Vanessa was as powerful as she seemed, she could be watching him, waiting for him to make a wrong move. But he couldn't let that stop him. He had to find out what was going on, no matter the cost. As the days turned into weeks, Dan's investigation led him down a rabbit hole of secrets and lies. He discovered that Vanessa was part of a covert operation targeting a powerful criminal organization that had been operating under the radar for years. But the more he dug, the more he realized that Vanessa wasn't just after the criminals. She was after something else, something far more dangerous. It all came to a head one night when Dan finally tracked Vanessa down to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. He found her inside, surrounded by a group of armed men who looked like they meant business. "Vanessa," Dan shouted, his voice echoing through the empty space. "It's over. I know what you're after, and I'm not going to let you get away with it." Vanessa turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "Officer Harris," she said, her voice calm, "I told you to stay out of this, but you just couldn't help yourself, could you?" Dan's heart pounded as he stepped closer, his hand resting on the butt of his gun. "I'm not going to let you hurt anyone else, Vanessa. Whatever you're planning, it ends here." Vanessa's lips curled into a faint smile, but there was no warmth in it. "You're brave, Officer Harris, I'll give you that. But you're also in way over your head." Before Dan could react, Vanessa raised her device and the symbols on the screen began to glow once more. Dan braced himself, expecting to be frozen in place again, but this time, nothing happened. Vanessa's smile faltered, and for the first time, Dan saw a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice steady. "Did your little toy stop working?" Vanessa's expression hardened and she tossed the device aside, drawing a gun from her holster instead. "I don't need that to deal with you," she said, her voice cold. The two of them stood there, locked in a tense standoff, each waiting for the other to make the first move. But before either of them could act, the sound of sirens filled the air, and the warehouse was suddenly flooded with light. The next few hours were a blur. Dan learned that Vanessa had been working undercover, trying to bring down a powerful criminal organization that had been operating in Willow Creek for years. The device she had used on him was part of a top-secret FBI program designed to neutralize threats without violence. But there was more to it than that. Vanessa had been after something else. A piece of technology that the criminals had stolen, something that could change the world if it fell into the wrong hands. And she had been willing to do whatever it took to get it back, even if it meant crossing lines she never thought she would. In the end, Vanessa's mission was a success. The criminals were arrested, the technology was recovered, and Willow Creek was safe once more. But for Dan, the experience had changed everything. He had seen a side of the world he never knew existed, and he knew he would never be the same. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to A1 Storyteller, and ring the bell so you never miss a story. And remember, the world is full of stories waiting to be told. So stay curious, stay brave, and keep coming back for more. Until next time, this is A1 Storyteller signing off. See you in the next story.